And the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
My name is Nicola Charles and I'm a proud anti-vaxxer from Victoria, Australia. Now, I've been worried about vaccines for a long time, but it's not just those clear substances in vials that get injected into people's arms that I'm concerned about. It's vaccines being dropped from the sky as aerosols and vaccines that are added to liquids that we can drink. In 2013, the Australian government administered 1,000 cholera vaccines to recipients in a drink. Who is delivering your water every day, and what is the quality of that water? They've already told us that it contains fluoride, a neurotoxin. 3 years ago, I stopped drinking tap water and recently went onto the Zeta Potential program. This adds alkalinity to the blood and also increases your electrolytes. Something is giving people mass cancers around the world, and jumping onto Zeta Potential for me has been one way for me to alleviate my fears. If you want to jump on the knowledge train with regard to water, click on the link below this show.
Hello, it is Thursday, May the 15th, 2025, and for most of Australia, that means it's payday. Everywhere but here on the Daily Australian, we don't need money. We just keep working as hard as we possibly can, creating hard-hitting, opinions out of hard-hitting news that is sometimes too hard to take. But we've turned a corner here at the Daily Australian, and that means that you, the listener, you, the viewer, are realising that we are two human beings behind the camera, and that means that what you see is what you get, warts and all. And all of that means that we are looking to create a new world for everyone who is sick and tired of being told what to do by the tyrants in power. And shortly, when we reveal today's headline news, you will be shocked, but no, you won't. You'll say it is about time. What am I getting to? It's very, very cryptic, and that's what I want you to do, because I want you to stay on and hang around for today's show. It is a radio show like no other, even if I say so myself. My name is Jason Olbourne, and I'm joined now by Nicola Charles. Nicola, wow, halfway through the month already. Welcome back. What a show we've got planned.
I know. The months and years go quicker the older you get, don't they? Let me first apologise to the audience if I look a bit stiff today. My neck has gone out, so I've got quite an important day. My daughter's got her driving test today. And I don't know if I'm stressed about that or it's the change in weather and the cold snap, but I've gone a bit stiff, so I'll be a bit robotic today. But let me just reassure all the conspiracy theorists, I am not a, what are they called? Not a drone, a copycat human.
A robot, a Westworld.
I am Nicola Charles. My neck is totally out down one side. I'm sure this hasn't happened to me, Jason, since I was 15 and going for my mock exams. So that's a 40-year gap between my neck going out. Interesting. Now, I just want to highlight to people, if you want to jump on our X accounts, there's always some funny stuff on there. Keir Starmer has literally tweeted out, I can't believe the gall of this guy, that he is removing 27,000 illegal migrants that he allowed into the UK, and he's deporting them, and he's saying, I won't stop there. And there's all these comments saying, yeah, but you imported them on boats, so what's going on? And so somebody asked Grok, and look, I'm not saying Grok is God, but they do, they do collate facts on there. And they said, did he deport 27,000 migrants? And Grok came back with references that 19 plus almost 20,000 of these migrants, illegal migrants, self-deported because the UK government offered them £3,000. That's about 8,000, 9,000 Aussie dollars. So the UK government, Keir Starmer, imported these people. Then they marched through the streets all in black, doing this terrifying, their call to prayer thing that they do. And now he's paying them an awful lot of money. Any one of us would appreciate that amount of money right now, He's paying them to leave. So what he actually deported, enforced deported, was about 6,000 migrants. So I tell you, Jason, he's smart. He's a former Crown prosecutor. He's smart, that guy. So you pay to import them, give them all the clothes and the puffer jackets because it was cold in the UK, give them somewhere to live in a hotel, and then pay them to leave. If that isn't a circle of money laundering, I don't know what is, Jason.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, to think that you would turn it around so far. Now, what's interesting there is that he did meet with Trump, and you do wonder if this is part of this tariff negotiation that he's been a little bit pressured there.
Wow.
Because we have heard that Trump's been talking about, freedom of speech in some of these countries as a lever to be able to negotiate a better
But it
better
hasn't
tariff
filtered
deal.
down to Albo, Jason.
Well, Albo's coming, and I wonder if the reason why Trump didn't reach out to Albo or accept phone calls in the election period was obviously waiting to see who won that election, and he was obviously didn't think much of Dutton, to not even know his name at that point, which is irrelevant now anyway. So this is the thing with Trump, is that he certainly, success breeds success, and he's very focused on success. So whilst you might be on the Trump team, if you will, if you're not successful, you won't get noticed. And so I find that fascinating as well. But having said that, I interviewed someone this week, AJ Rice, a PR a fellow from one of the best PR guys in DC. Now, he's only got a very small following on X, smaller than mine, but he's been to the White House, and in fact, he had to postpone his interview with me 2 weeks ago because of the fact that he'd been invited there. So my own theory sort of doesn't hold water necessarily, but it's probably the people that he's worked with. Everyone from RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Marjorie Taylor Greene. He was on Don Trump Jr.'s own podcast. So even that, so perhaps there is a way that you can get in, but it's fascinating to see what's going on and whether or not Trump will be able to put the pressure on Australia to relax some of their our misinformation laws or censorship laws or whatever. But
I don't know. I think the trade between the UK and America is important enough. Right, because apparently they've lifted all the tariffs on British-made cars, but I'm not sure what cars are still made in the UK, to be honest. But you see, Australia relies on China, and that's my concern. Because Albo doesn't need Trump to like him, right? He just does more business with China, which is not necessarily what we want, is it?
Well, we still have to export goods. It's one thing to import them, but we want to be able to export, and we do export, our cattle to the US. Obviously, we want to get our iron ore everywhere, our other forms of energy, etc. So
Coal.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, well, coal will sell to anyone except ourselves because apparently we live in a bubble down here, and yeah. So it's fascinating, isn't it? Really fascinating that that we have to pretend so often, and like we saw yesterday, Susan Ley, the new leader of the Liberals, Turnbull in a skirt, literally saying that she's that's
I
Rita
think
Panahy's.
we're looking at like the madness of King George.
Yes.
I think the monarchy's gone insane. And I think what's happened is, and some of the stories we're going to talk about today reflect this, is this thing has happened where human rights and civil rights have been sidelined because trees and the planet have more rights. Well, it doesn't make sense because Albo is chopping down loads of trees. Someone listed how many trees he's chopped down today. That's on my X account. He's not very friendly to the environment, let me tell you. But it's this thing of the madness of them is that we don't count anymore, and that everything they do, obviously their justification is for the planet, but it's not making any sense because they're saying crazy things. I mean, one of the stories we're going to cover later on is shocking. I don't know if you want to get into it now, but there is a story that's out there factually that they are engineering ticks to infect people with a virus that makes you allergic to red meat. So you will become ill if you eat red meat. And they are saying that they're going to get these things to bite us. We become allergic to red meat. And then they're going to genetically engineer the animals so that then we can eat them because we've been infected terrorist style with this virus. And then, of course, they own the animals. So right now, you can't patent anything that's found in nature: a cow, a pig, a sheep, a chicken. But of course, if they make us all allergic to the natural animal world and they genetically engineer one we can eat, they make lots of money. But that's not good for us, obviously.
Well, how about we play that clip right now? This is taken from the Jimmy Dore show. We're going to just cut a little bit out of it now for you.
And if they were to cut down on their consumption on meat, then it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So,
oh, you're one of those? You're one of those people who just doesn't have the willpower to stop eating meat? Okay. Are you going to test these ticks on yourself then, I guess? Let's see. So they got ticks now. They remember, Lyme disease?
Yes.
Pretty clear that was another one of these COVID things where they engineered it as a bioweapon. And then ticks have it, and then they bite you, and then you get Lyme disease. That wasn't a secret, right? I think he said it to us on. Anyway, I know somebody who got bit by a tick, and it gives you an allergy to red meat. So if you eat, so the problem is you don't know you have it until after you've eaten it, and it takes a couple of hours, and then you almost die. So this guy almost died, and he found out that he was bitten by a tick that gave him this allergic reaction to red meat. So now he can never eat red meat for the rest of his life. Isn't that wild? So Dr. Ben Braddock says ticks are spreading a disease that makes people allergic to red meat. Some farmers and ranchers who get it can't even go near their own livestock. Every week I hear of more cases near me. The federal government needs to treat this with much more urgency. This is real. Bill Gates funded research into genetically engineered cattle ticks. Now, 450,000 Americans have red meat allergies from alpha-gal syndrome. That's a real thing, alpha-gal syndrome, caused by tick bites. Did Bill Gates do this? Mike Benz tweeted this out. At 2016 World Science Festival, this is a guy named Dr. Matthew Lau. He's a philosopher and a bioethicist. You're going to hear just how unbioethicist he is.
And isn't it not a surprise that the name William Gates comes up yet again?
Yeah. And Jimmy Dore mentioned, I watched that whole thing, and he mentioned that, it is now suspected that this whole Lyme disease thing was also genetically engineered. And I have friends in America who suffer with that. So isn't this terrorism? Jason, I just want to ask you, isn't this terrorism? Isn't this biological terrorism? Who is allowing them to put things out there into a community that make people ill?
I don't know how you can define it any other way. And the shocking thing is that the inaction or the turning the head the other way to not notice, this art of politicians to want to get into your lives about absolutely anything and everything. But when it comes to something as large as this, they look the other way. I remember the opening of the movie Field of Dreams and the voiceover of Kevin Costner saying if something about if you tell a lie big enough, the more people believe it. And it seems that it's the same way. So on the micro level, all of us are considered to be criminals if we have if we have $50 notes in our wallet. But at the other end, Bill Gates can, do literally whatever experiment he likes. And as long as the narrative is justified, those receiving Bill Gates money turn their head the other way and don't worry about it. There'd be people out there saying, well, not all of us are going to get bitten by ticks, so we shouldn't have to worry about it. But, I mean, what are we playing? A form of Russian roulette every single time that this goes on? And that's what it is, because who knows who's going to get bitten tomorrow? It's extraordinary.
They say in that clip that the medical profession has said they estimate that about 450,000 Americans have already been bitten by this genetically modified tick, and they've even engineered it so it has a little white dot on it, so that they know, like if someone goes into hospital to help with diagnosis, if someone goes into hospital, they see the tick attached with that little white dot and they know, oh, that's one of the Bill Gates terrorism ticks. Now we know what you've got. I believe it's called AGS, alpha-gal syndrome. Alpha-gal is the name of it. I mean, it's so nasty. When I was little, I used to read when my kids were little, I used to read storybooks to them about how mad scientists were going to destroy the world. And here we are, Jason.
Bill Gates isn't even a scientist. He's not even tertiary educated. He's never been elected to public office, and he gets to play an Austin Powers villain in real life, like Klaus Schwab. And we just have to sit here and take it. You do wonder if we ever will see somebody in handcuffs, if one of those people will be Bill Gates. And if you had a choice, would you take Bill Gates or Anthony Fauci at this point?
I take Bill Gates because Fauci is definitely a hitman. And I used to think Bill Gates was a hitman, a hired hitman. But now I think he's the orchestrator. I think he sold it to the monarchy. I think he sold it to our governments. He sold it all under the banner of climate change, the climate hoax. And it's such a big book, isn't it? The amount of lists you can write that can be, people's lives can be affected by the climate change lie. And even under that Jimmy Dore clip, there was, the community notes that YouTube put. I'm surprised he's still on YouTube, not trying to get you taken off YouTube, Jimmy. But there was a community note and it was from the UN. And it was like, hey, it's the UN here. And it said climate change is real and it's man-made and it's because of fossil fuels. Now, that just straight away for me delegitimizes the UN because there is so much evidence out there that that's not the case. But of course, this is the lie they're going to sell because there's profit and power and control in it.
And therefore, they are the purveyors of misinformation. But
Yeah.
But anyone who opposes that is accused of said misinformation. What is projection 101? And as Tucker Carlson said, there are only truth and lies. And so therefore, anyone who is going against it is considered to be a misinformer. But realistically, they're just simply telling the truth. That is a perfect example of what we are up against. It's extraordinary. But you know what? Sometimes the truth comes out. And in our headline news today, we're going to talk about a particular story that Channel 9's been forced to admit, Nicola. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, and this relates to something I experienced a couple of weeks ago. I shared it on my X account. So I got a message from my bank, Westpac, one of my banks, and this is a bank that I joined in 2012, saying that my account had been restricted because they needed me to verify my ID and they wanted me to go into a branch and do facial recognition. I said, I'm not going to do that. And this is a bank I've been with since 2012 when I got back from America. They have my birth certificate, my passport. They have various work contracts. They have my visa. They have everything they need to know about me, but they need to verify my ID. So then, I wake up this morning and I see this story, which was the first interesting story that I'd seen on mainstream media for such a long time, that legitimate businessmen in Australia were also being threatened with debanking. So that, in a sense, it made me feel better. I thought, okay, that's not a daily Australian thing then. That's just what's going on. And it's all related to this really offensive notion. Again, Bill Gates, I'm sure the climate hoax is behind this somewhere, of know your customer. So if you go onto Google and put in KYC, it will come up, know your customer. Bill Gates and his billionaire partner in India came up with this years ago. And so they want to know when you walk through the doors of your supermarket or anywhere else, and they want you to have your digital ID. I don't think anyone's going to do that now. They want to know everything about you. And there's this poor guy, this Australian, who's been brave enough to speak out about the kinds of questions he's been asked, Jason, just to keep his bank account.
When they went into demanding to know what I'm doing with cash, have I got cash at home?
Have you got cash at home? Why
like everybody else has a bit of cash at home.
That's right.
And then to ask why I've got cash at home.
Yes.
Like, hang on.
It seems bizarre.
And this is a security risk for me and my family.
I'm looking after my family. We need cash on hand. I mean, who among us doesn't have some cash on hand in the case of emergencies? We've seen even in recent months, the lines go down. There's full shopping trolleys at Woolies and everywhere else. People are suddenly unable to buy or do any kind of transaction because they don't have cash on hand.
The Commonwealth Bank of Australia have released a statement explaining what's happened. Here's their statement. They said, we're required to manage our customers' accounts in line with the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act 2006, which sets out that all banks operating within Australia are required to collect, verify and maintain customer identification information, which, Liz, raises the question, customer identification, how does knowing the amount of cash you've got
they know who he is
under your mattress,
he's got an account with
help the bank to identify you? How does the bank knowing why you gave money to a particular party help them to identify you. They've gone way beyond
Indeed.
their own statement, have they not?
So you've just seen a clip of Louis Christopher explaining what's going on, and it's obvious that the Commonwealth Bank here has overstepped the mark. Yet we're meant to feel like that this is just a normal business transaction. So, Nicola, there's a couple of things, and you've received correspondence from your bank. Are you still with them?
No, they've restricted my account. So I have to go in and close it. I have to go in personally and close it. I'm sure I'll have to ID myself for that as well.
It's unreal, isn't it? Like, is it so you've still got money in the account that you need to get out?
Not much. I hadn't used it for a long time, and I thought that's why they were sort of a bit ticked off with me. But it's sort of really, it's just nostalgia is the only reason I keep that account, because my TV funds used to go in there and stuff like that. But I always thought it would be a decent bank. And then when I received this, I thought, wow, I did put this on the X account, and Westpac got back to me and they said, oh, let's talk about it. But what's there to talk about? These banks are crossing the line and I'm not prepared to cross that line with them. So see you later.
No, absolutely. Well, look, I was able to reach out to somebody that I know in anti-money laundering and provided the clip to get some perspective. And it's really interesting. It's quite detailed, the response. It's well worth reading out into the show. And the reason that I'm going to do that is that I want people to understand how, from an insider, about how this actually works and what the real perspectives are. And I think what you're going to realize is that we might be dealing with, again, certainly overreach, but also, we need to understand that how the game works. I'm going to read it to you, then we'll have a discussion about it at the end. Here we go. So AUSTRAC, who was involved here, discern anti-money laundering legislation. To read and reference the legislation every day is what this operator says. None of these questions are required or are required know your customer questions other than the source of wealth, which technically you can say you prefer not to disclose. The other questions are likely targeted at this person due to suspicious behaviour rather than being sent to random individuals. Now, he hasn't specified in his past, but what did I make certain transactions to third parties means that there have been numerous, not just one or two, suspicious transactions that have been manually or automatically picked up to indicate that something is going on. And it is pretty obvious when third-party transactions are suspicious, especially a bank of that size. They just don't have the time to worry about people sending money to their friends for dinner. The interesting thing is that it is illegal to tip off that you are suspicious of a customer's behaviour. So if you say, I'm submitting a report about you, you can actually be personally liable, and it's like a $44,000 fine, something like that. I'm sure that they have strict policies and procedures in place as to not tip off that they are suspicious. They are framing the know your customer, which is the legislative requirement to hold a bank account in Australia. Know your customer is specifically country of citizenship, ID verification, full name, date of birth, source of income, country of birth. But those questions are framed around suspicious behaviour or conversations based on the questions. They have enough information to raise concerns to AUSTRAC. AUSTRAC doesn't come back and say, can you investigate this more? If it needs investigation, it goes to the police. Part of AUSTRAC's anti-money laundering legislation is that you need to have your own anti-money laundering compliance requirements. So you follow their rules and then you have your own rules and procedures. So if someone is money laundering or financing terrorism on your platform, you can stand in court and say, in accordance with our policies, we undertook due diligence and it was reasonable for us to facilitate this person's transactions, and it just so happens that they were involved in financial crime. That's when call centre staff don't ask a barrage of questions when you make a big transfer and it goes to a scammer. The bank is liable, hence why you get asked a barrage of questions. Finally, there'll be a clause in the Commonwealth Bank's terms and conditions that says that they can offboard a customer for any reason. If he was any person demonstrating that much suspicious activity, they would likely have just given him the flick. So, short answer, with all that in mind, my understanding is it sounds like he is a high-value customer that they don't want to get rid of, so they have sent him as this person put, a retarded email giving him a chance to bullshit his way out of suspicious behaviour, so that if and when he is held accountable for it, the Commonwealth Bank can simply put their hands up and say, well, we tried. So in other words, Austrac is pushing the Commonwealth Bank. The Commonwealth Bank has clearly overstepped the mark, so maybe there's a management problem or a training issue involved there. They can certainly be challenged. The person who's pushing this is personally liable. So if Louis Christopher wants to take this further, he has got some avenues involved there. It's very, very interesting that they are really pushing the envelope. And this is the point, right? Because real power is never given, it must be taken. And so what we're having here is a situation that the Commonwealth Bank, working with Austrac, they're jostling with each other to try and get ahead of the curve. And it's the customer, the human being, the individual in the beginning, that when they stand up and just call it out, like this has been suggested here, the bank will back down. Now, having known that, I have heard so many stories of how the bank refuses to look at obvious forms of fraud, and they just turn their head the other way. And they also have certain what do you call them? Criteria, but also KPIs is where I was going.
Oh, yes.
To meet the requirements of people working in these spaces. So in other words, if you work in preventing fraud in a bank, what you want to do is to show that there is no fraud going on. But the easiest way to show that there's no fraud going on is to not detect any fraud. So if you detect fraud and you take it to your manager and the manager goes, oh, well, I don't know, maybe, or whatever, which is what they do, because if we go for it and it's wrong, then we look stupid. This is the point. So what happens is a good sleuth working within the bank detecting real fraud is often kept at arm's length because they're too good at their job. And this is what I talk about, being promoted to your level of incompetence. This is the dark side of what's really going on here. So you have to be really, really, really clever working within the system. It just shows you that the system is corrupt. Now, in Louis Christopher's case, I would love to be able to reach out to him and provide him with this information to see where he wants to go further. But that is entirely up to Louis to want to take this further action. But it's interesting.
I say he's pretty brave going on Sky News. Our insider in fraud said that, giving him a chance to bullshit his way out of it. I think going on Sky News and being outraged is a pretty good way, same as me putting my post on X. Like, we've got nothing to hide. And the sad thing is, in the long form of that Sky News interview, which was sent to me because I don't have television, is one of the guys was saying, that you can go into some of the rundown areas in any city in Australia and you can see that these people have no money, and yet they will have really expensive cars sitting on the driveway. They will have Range Rovers and Jaguars and Teslas and all this thing. And that they didn't acquire the money for those legitimately. But they're not the people that the banks are coming down on. It's those of us who do boring things like shop in vintage stores and, pay bills and stuff. So it's weird. I almost feel like, is it deliberate? Do they want us all to feel and know, because it is Sky News, so I'm a little bit suspicious. Do they want us to all know this, that we're going to be expected to identify, everything that we're doing, share it, essentially reveal things that are private to us? I don't want, as I said the other day, if someone's paying for pornography, that's not something I'm into, but in our country, they have a legitimate right to be able to do that as long as they're not breaking any laws, right? So privacy is really, really important to me, even for people who live quite dull lives like myself, to be frank. So I'm worried that this is almost a psyop, that they want us all to know you're going to have to betray everything, because they said to that guy, you've removed some cash, you've withdrawn cash, and that was obviously fine at the time, even though we know some people are having trouble withdrawing cash from Australian banks. But you have that cash at home. It's like they know, and they want to know what you're going to do with it. And they were saying on the show, like, who doesn't have some disposable cash at home? Because I can tell you now, when for 4 days where I am, the electricity failed, only people with cash could shop. And so what are you supposed to do in that scenario? You can't buy a loaf of bread. You can't buy anything. The FPOS machines are down. So I don't like it. And this is all part of my concern where, governments and so-called elected officials, like Jacinta Allen, who's now fangirling over Zelensky, she's written him a personal letter. Their job is to protect and represent Australians, but they would never, go up against these banks. And that's why I said in a hypothetical Conservative Party that I would start, banking reform has to be one of the policies. They can't run roughshod over Australians. It's none of your business. And when my husband, in the middle of the pandemic, we had a power cut, he was worried about not having any cash. He went to the bank and withdrew a few $1,000s, let's say, right? Under 10,000. And the woman at the counter said to him in I think it was a Ferntree Gully bank, a little country bank. She was counting out the money and she leant forward and she said to him, part of my training is I need to ask you, do you have a drug problem? And he said, sorry. And she said, do you have a drug problem? And he said, not that that's any of your business, but no. And then she said, do you have a gambling problem? And he said, hang on, what's this about? I'm withdrawing my own money. Why are you asking me these questions? And she said, well, you know, it's a large amount of money. And he said, let me be clear. If I want to take this home and burn it on a bonfire or go and gamble it at the casino or pay for a few hours with hookers, that's none of your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, again, because the banks have been so sloppy at detecting fraud and are held liable and have been able to cough up the money, because the fraud is just, you know, it's off the charts. You see it all the time, right? And we all know that, you know, the various different scams. You get a phone call, oh, we're from Telstra. We've detected something with your computer. Go online and they steal stuff, and, you know, various different things that go on. So what they then do is they overstep the mark and they play this game. So when you go to the bank, because I went the other day to deposit some cash, and she asked me some questions, etc.
Did she?
But they were very basic. But what I did was I knew what was coming, so I kind of preempted it. And so I just said, look, I sold a car, putting some cash in the bank. What I actually said was something different. I said, I'm here to make a personal donation to myself, and which was basically the same. I'm making a deposit. So what I did was I broke the ice to just and I got a laugh from behind the teller, and because everyone can hear everyone else, a customer heard and had a laugh, and we're just doing it backwards. So that was just an interesting way of just doing that. But I got her to admit that it was because of fraud that they are asking these questions, but that also I said, but there are certain things that you can't ask people, and you have no right to ask. And in the end, she actually thanked me. She said, look, thanks for coming in today. It was just enlightening. So again, it's just a different approach.
It's like they're criminalizing banking, Jason, right? If they need to tell us if they're going to police us through our banking, be honest about it. Don't call it know your customer. You know, talk about that there's been an unseen silent banking reform and that we're being policed through banking. And if that's the case, then these kind of individuals that live in low rent homes but drive, you know, $200,000 motor cars, why aren't they at the top of the list, right? Because that's not how average people live. Something's going on.
Absolutely. Well, they might not even have a bank account, and that's why they haven't turned up yet. So that's also interesting. Now, on that video clip that was shared on Facebook, I noticed two clever comments there. One from a fellow called Jake Daniel, who simply said, unfortunately, this is the result of the Royal Commission into Banks a few years ago, where anti-money laundering and know your customer policies were brought about, supposedly to get rid of criminal money laundering. Cash is now assumed by financial institutions as suspicious. But then there was Craig McPherson, who said, simply tell them it's for blow and hookers and bribing politicians.
Exactly. Very good. Well, here's the thing I was going to say. I didn't comment under it because I don't really go onto Facebook, but is that, you know, the biggest money launderers in the world, we now know, are banks and super funds and, you know, all of these big companies and also governments, right? You know, we talked earlier about the round and round of this, you know, engineering the tick, and it makes you allergic to natural meat, and then they engineer a fake pig, and they've got the patent on that. So, you know, pork goes up, but that's the only one you can eat because we've made you allergic to real food, right? So all of these people are involved in money laundering. So we've now got money launderers governing and policing us against money laundering. So I guess in essence, you could say it takes one to know one. So maybe they'll be quite good at it, Jason.
Absolutely. It's also interesting that Bill Gates got into trouble at Microsoft for anti-competitive behaviour and went through this massive antitrust trial where he was standing there in the deposition and he's shaking and doing all this crazy stuff, rocking, etc. Now, if you go out and become the number one pasture land owner in America at the same time that you want to bring in fake meat and manufacture mosquitoes and ticks, how is that not even more
Suspicious.
antitrust?
But I think he's CIA. I think when they got him on all that stuff, because I think this is how it works, right? He was a guy that was given a leg up by his mom, who was well connected in banking, and then unfortunately he had his father's ideology of Planned Parenthood, and this is how you keep the population down. So he was made of strange things, Bill Gates. But he did have, great connections, lots of money behind him. Of course, he scammed his way into certain situations, used other people's intelligence to say, I designed it, I invented it. So then you're in a bit of trouble, right? And they say that all people that are super successful are a bit dodgy like this. There's always a criminal element to them. You can't climb up the ladder that quickly doing everything legitimately. We know that because it's hard for people like us to do it. And we get plenty of good ideas. And what usually happens is we'll apply for a patent. They'll say, oops, sorry, someone came up with it before you, and they'll steal your idea. So what I think is they thought this guy could be an amazing asset. He is obviously going to go forward in this software world, the world of computers. And of course, that has merged into now healthcare, because there's nothing like a good software update in your healthcare. And I think he's an asset. I think many people that we see and think are successful people are assets. And the thing is, we will never know because the CIA are very good at this. But I can tell you now, there's no way a person like Bill Gates is undertaking biological and technological terrorism upon innocent people to the billions across the globe without authority from somewhere.
Well, of course, he's been put into that position, right? I've got a video or a story, call it a mini documentary, if you will, on Bill Gates on my YouTube page, which people can look at if they want to. It's been there for some time. Quite proud of it, and it's a work in progress because there's just more and more information. What I might do is probably find the link of it and put it under the show on the Substack today, for those that are interested. But what I wanted to go there to support what you've just said, if we talk about compromat, right? So if we just backtrack on some of the things that have happened. So Melinda Gates said that she felt uncomfortable with Bill Gates' relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, had met Jeffrey Epstein once and realised that was a no-go zone. And so that was part of the reason for the breakup. Now, that's a small part, and there's a little bit more. I'll just quickly read off this one. This is from the Economic Times, and it's been supported in the New York Times, etc. Bill Gates' infidelity saw Microsoft management keep young interns away from the tech mogul. Here's what we know about this shocking development. So this goes back to a story that was written, it was updated last year, but it goes back some time from his Microsoft days. Yeah. Bill Gates had been Microsoft's pillar of strength of decades since its founding and transformation into the billion-dollar entity. However, there have been times that Microsoft had to safeguard itself and their founder's repute by taking one rather unusual step, starting with keeping young interns away from Bill Gates due to his flirty nature that could have landed him and the employees at the workplace in a bit of a problem. So this came out from a book called Billionaire Nerd Savior King, Bill Gates and His Quest to Shape Our World. So there's some stories in there. Now, according to the book, Bill Gates landed in marriage problems right from the start of being hitched in 1994 when he was still after Anne Winblad, a tech entrepreneur. This had initially created a major rift between the Gates couple, according to the excerpts. So this is the very beginning, and it goes on from there. So obviously, Melinda Gates becomes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She's a billionaire, if you will, philanthropist and et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, they break up, they keep the foundation going, and now there's an announcement last week that the foundation is going to close officially December 31, 2045. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to announce that you're going to close in 20 years' time, but it's kind of, at least there's something there that this thing can't go on forever.
There's some money laundering still to do there, Jason.
Correct. So there's obviously, and defence, obviously got to have a defence strategy if you actually get challenged or arrested. Now, Bill Gates, as we know, tried to get a Nobel Peace Prize, and the way that he tried to do that was that this was the reason that, one of the reasons he befriended Jeffrey Epstein was that Jeffrey Epstein was connected with the Nobel Peace Prize Committee that just so happened to have a former Norwegian Prime Minister on its board as its chair. Now, the weird thing is there's some very strange connections with the Norwegians and Jeffrey Epstein. There's multiple. There's crown princesses, former prime ministers, plural, etc. So what happened was that Jeffrey Epstein took Bill Gates with him to meet this head of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, who was the former prime minister of Norway, and to make the introduction. And ultimately, of course, they decided not to give him a Nobel Peace Prize, and likely because the Epstein connections came through, etc. But this is what Gates would want to do. So could you imagine, from a point of credentialism, if Gates had actually got that Nobel Peace Prize, people would have put him onto a pedestal like they did with Obama, who got his fake Nobel Peace Prize. If anything, what happened when Obama got his, it basically meant the Nobel Peace Prizes weren't worth the $1 million that you get for winning them anymore. They're a waste of time.
Yeah, so but they thought it made them untouchable. And it's interesting about that Norwegian ex-prime minister, because that's where the seed vault is under the ice.
100%. So now you're starting to, isn't this amazing? The Daily Australian, we talked about it from day one, that you will see narratives interweave here.
Yeah.
And almost every story that we bring up that we can connect to another story goes to another one, and another one. So Bill Gates might not be the tip of the spear or the head of the snake, but he certainly works for whoever is at that level. And it's very important. So when you say that, that there are connections to the spy agency, there is no question. And the very fact that he had a relationship or kept a relationship with Epstein, now you have to wonder, was he introduced to Epstein, who we know was a spy, certainly for Mossad and certainly for the CIA? Was he introduced to that as part of being part of the people at the farm, what they call the CIA? In other words, it was business as usual, hiding in plain sight.
To compromise him. They'd have videos of Bill Gates. If they
100%.
If they want him to do what he's doing now, they have to compromise him, and that's how they get him. That's how they got royalty. That's how they got all of it. And I think, you know, the big names that you hear of, the big banking names, I think they probably are behind it. They have to be. Otherwise, you have to put it, you know, I mean, I guess it's all of them, but with Ghislaine Maxwell involved, and, you know, her father was both MI6, Mossad, CIA, you know, it's a big club, you know, isn't it? We're not in it.
Absolutely. Well, and another fun fact for everyone is that the prosecutor of Ghislaine Maxwell in the court that sent her to jail for, some 20 years was Maureen Comey, who happens to be the daughter of James Comey, the disgraced FBI former head that Trump got rid of. And Maureen
It's just
Comey...
a few families. This is just a few families that run everything. So I'll ask you a question, Jason. You won't like this one. How can she have been put in jail for human trafficking when so far she's human trafficked to 0 people? That's the names we've got, right?
Yep, that's right. So the only victims, so like...
We know the victims, but who did she human traffic to?
That's right. There's no customer list. Well, that's the missing link, of course. Well, where I was going to add that was that Maureen Comey is also prosecuting Diddy. Sean Combs. So she's in the court right now. So you do wonder with this whether or not she's going to throw this particular case, if she does, or if it's beyond that, and the reputation is that no, she's determined to get them. So isn't it interesting? Because if you would go up the chain, for example, and maybe there isn't a connection to Epstein, but if you could follow that chain up, and then that chain came back and then caught the FBI in a criminal scenario, and Maureen Comey effectively, you know, roads lead to associates of her father. You know, where do you go at that point? Is that the real plan? Is that why Maureen Comey is prosecuting? So basically, they're going to get to a brick wall where it all gets exposed. Look, again, weaving narratives once again. Amazing.
It could be a what was his name who supposedly killed JFK? Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald. So the whole Diddy thing, I mean, Epstein's dead, and I don't believe he killed himself. So we could need a whole lot of people who look like bad guys and pedophiles and clients and stuff. And what a great way to placate society by getting this rapper who's a known deviant, and I have no doubt that he is, because I've seen some of the pictures of, you know, him in the hallway and girls cowering, you know. And also we have that audio and that report from a security guard who was literally there on the scene. But if you're about to offer up one of the world's most famous rappers, all of his rapper and movie star friends, and potentially some other notables that aren't important to the CIA who will be given as like human sacrifices to placate the masses. Here are all the bad people. Here's the list. Do you feel good about it? Do you feel satisfied? It will never tie in George Soros or Bill Gates or Keir Starmer or Joe Biden, the famous child sniffer, right? So none of the people who have really been at the tippity top of anything ever get caught, ever get held to account, but they know they have to offer something and somebody up.
Yes, until there's no one left to offer up. So I
Because
guess
Diddy's no good. He's no good to the CIA, is he? What can he do? Nothing.
not anymore if he's taken out. So it is interesting, isn't it? So is this coming to a head? I guess that's the big question. Are we going to, finally get to the bottom of it? And if we do, where do we go next? Now, another a fun fact that you mentioned, Epstein dead. When that whole incident happened, there was one photograph of a body being wheeled out on a gurney, which would be unusual that you would see, but maybe he wasn't considered dead at that time.
Oh,
But
God.
on the gurney, right? Epstein's nose was larger and more curved than it was otherwise.
So it
And
wasn't
where
him.
where I'm going with it is that he died on the 10th of August 2019. But on
Well,
June
maybe
the
he
7th,
didn't. Maybe he's living happily somewhere. If that wasn't his nose.
well, where I'm going is that, and of course we've done, looks checking and comparing the ear as well. But on June the 7th, 2019, so roughly 2 months prior, somebody else passed away who looked very, very similar to who I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to put it up on just to show it, and later on we'll see if we can add it in. But there's a character there for you. Can you see that
Come a
photograph?
bit closer to camera with that for me.
All right. So can you see that photo?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is, you ready for that? That's Tony Rodham. That's the brother of Hillary Clinton that died 2 months before Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh.
Now, Tony Rodham never had a funeral,
Oh, God.
right? So
Right.
where I'm going, right? So my
Put him on ice somewhere to be
my-
the dead
my-
body
yeah,
of Jeffrey Epstein.
my detectives said at the time, what if Tony Rodham was taken out, Tony Rodham was stored on ice for a later time,
Oh,
and
God.
when the Epstein thing went and happened, Tony Rodham's body is substituted onto the gurney to send a message to the deep state. Well, we got Tony, and therefore that is not Jeffrey, and you guys are fucked. And I don't know if that's the case, but
I think Jeffrey Epstein is alive and living well somewhere. I genuinely do. A lot of dodgy things went on during that period. Think about that Anne Heche. That was definitely an assassination. Her car was hacked. You could hear the brakes screaming on everyone's front
that's
door
extraordinary,
camera.
isn't it? Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
she unzipped the body bag they put her in, and she was flailing around like, I'm okay. And you know what? She didn't look burnt to death in a car crash the way they said. So that somebody murdered her because she was going to do a film, I believe, about Hollywood pedophiles.
Isn't it funny how that story comes up and whoever puts their head on
Connected.
the chopping block? See, when you consider that, right, and when you review history,
Yeah.
you then look and you go, my God, what does Mel Gibson know?
Yeah, he knows a lot. I mean, Anne Heche was also going to do a film about chemtrails and the climate hoax as well. So there's two things she was going to expose, and she knew what she was exposing, right? And the fact that she was Ellen's ex-wife, someone who is a big lefty head and needs to go out there and look like she has 100% integrity. She was a very, very messy loose end. And I'm really upset about that because I really liked Anne Heche. And the fact that we never get any answers about that none of the paramedics were interviewed and said, hey, why did you push her back into the body bag and zip her back up? This is this whole two-tier society that we live in. It's really scary. If they wanted to take any of us out, they would make up any story they like, and they could do it. Any story they like. They could say any of us took our own lives, and we're hearing about people taking their own lives all the time. They can say we had a secret drug problem, a prescription drug problem, or that we died in a bizarre gardening accident. That's usually what my friends say to me. You'll be going in a bizarre gardening accident in suspicious circumstances. It's not right, and we are essentially, I mean, it's a big statement, but I truly, truly believe that we are governed by a massive criminal cartel. And they have the gall to say to us, with Know Your Customer and all this banking crap and the climate hoax, we're going to watch you and we're going to make sure you don't miss a dollar of tax or carbon taxation. Someone sent me a picture I also shared on my X account from Stonington Council in Melbourne. Those RFID chips have turned up on their bins, got replaced while they were at work. And now they've got one of those green discs, which is an RFID chip. They contacted me and said, oh, what is this? And luckily I was able to tell them because they want to know what goes in your trash. Do you think we'll ever know what goes in Bill Gates' trash, Jason?
I'm just trying to think what would actually be in Bill Gates's trash. I know there'd be a lot of Diet Coke cans.
I think
So
there'd be
isn't that-
some litter from a litter tray because he must have that Bond villain fluffy
Yes.
cat.
But very, very true. But he's addicted to Diet Coke, so that's not necessarily going to be too good for him.
Aspartame. And keep drinking
Yeah.
that, Bill.
That's right. So
Keep
if you'd like to, perhaps don't send a donation here to the Daily Australian today. Send a carton of Diet Coke to the Seattle, Washington mansion of Bill Gates and say, thanks, Bill. Have another dozen on us. It's interesting. Now, another one that I want to bring up before we go to the news, because we're already 3/4 of the way through the show, and I hope you're enjoying this slightly revised format, this more organic show that we're putting together for you and talking about. It's real radio. I love it. And one day you'll be able to tune in on your radio or maybe through an app or something like that, and you'll get the Daily Australian wherever you're listening in the car.
Or a digital TV channel. You never know.
Very, very true. Good point. You sent it to me earlier, and this is just a recap. Many people will be aware of it, but for those that aren't, the Thomas Matthew Crooks and Ryan Wesley Routh. So these are the two alleged attempted assassins of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Both of them featured in BlackRock commercials. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to play this for you. It's only about 30 or 40 seconds. Have a look at it. We'll come back, and then we'll throw to the news. Astonishing.
The action is to appeal to world leaders. World organization.
My name is Brian DeLallo. I teach AP and Honors Economics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Financial well-being to me is knowing that I can be free to do the things that I love to do. I hope when I retire someday, they say, that guy made this place a special place. School and gave as much as he could to help the community.
Nicola, what are the odds?
I mean, they literally throw it in your face, don't they?
So again, could you imagine? So let's just play along with the psychology for just a moment. So this random looking Thomas Matthew Crooks, a nerdy young kid, gets offered this particular thing, probably paid a few $1,000s to feature in a TV commercial. So he's clearly picked from somewhere, some casting agent linked to someone who's working within the BlackRock TV advertising campaign picks this person, the same as they do with Ryan Wesley Routh, and they turn up and they get paid. So therefore they become a bit of an insider. So they've got their palms greased, and then they get encouraged to do something else. So you wonder, do they go to the funny farm to find these people and then turn them into someone, or are they found in another way? That's where I'm going with it. So so what we're saying is, can we uncover the recruitment process that these agencies are using in order to find these characters?
Or
Because
AI on your phone listening to lunatics going, oh, that would be a good person. We could turn him.
So an example, right, was that when Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly killed JFK, he's walked out into this undercover sort of car park police station, and then out pops Jack Ruby out of nowhere in point blank range and shoots dead Lee Harvey Oswald.
And
Now,
no
Jack
one
Ruby,
else, just him.
correct. And when questioned on it, he says, I didn't want Jackie to suffer any more pain. Well, why wouldn't you want to know that he actually did it and why and who was involved? But no, you
Why
wipe
wouldn't you
him
want
out.
justice in court? Yeah.
Exactly. And so Jack Ruby dies later from cancer. The question is, and of course it'll be rebutted, was Jack Ruby already dying of cancer? And I don't believe that the official facts will rule it that way.
No, he
although
got
I
a
used to
flu
think he
shot in
was.
jail. You've seen the documentary, right? They gave him a lot of flu shots in jail.
So I guess the question is, if you're going to go down for that, and you're a nightclub owner and you're semi-successful, have they got you on something that says, mate, you're finished anyway? What we're going to do is we're going to set your family up for life. There's going to be a large sum of money, but this is what you're going to do, and that's the end of it. Because there would be people, certainly there would be people that would do something like that. Like you hear of, people trying to take their own lives to get a life insurance payout for their families. The idea that, they're worth more dead than alive. That's the psychology I'm speaking about here. So, yeah, exactly. So it's quite shocking.
But it's interesting because there's a premise, there's an idea about this, and this includes Bill Gates. And there's a phrase that comes from the intelligence communities themselves, and they say, no one gets to grow old in the world of spies and lies. And Lee Harvey Oswald was believed to be CIA. There's a whole documentary about that, incredible documentary. And he was involved in those original SV40 monkey things causing cancer trials. He was involved in all that, Lee Harvey Oswald. And he was just, putting things in the mail and dropping things off at his girlfriend's house and saying, put this in the fridge and take care of it. I mean, there's an amazing documentary. His ex-girlfriend spoke out on an interview show. But yeah, let's hope in the case of Bill Gates that no one gets to, although he is already old, no one gets to grow old in the world of spies and lies, because as I always say on my podcast, there is no honor among thieves. When you cease to be useful to these people, or the public are baying for blood enough because of the harms you've caused, either you don't get to grow old like Lee Harvey Oswald, or you have to get shipped off and never be seen again like Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we keep watching. So, look, we're probably only 10 minutes left in the show. What I'm going to do is get into the news now for you. There's a well, not as much as normal, but there's still plenty of stories and some big ones for you. So let's do that for you right now.
My name is Nicola Charles, and I'm a proud anti-vaxxer from Victoria, Australia. Now, I've been worried about vaccines for a long time, but it's not just those clear substances in vials that get injected into people's arms that I'm concerned about. It's vaccines being dropped from the sky as aerosols, and vaccines that are added to liquids that we can drink. In 2013, the Australian government administered 1,000 cholera vaccines to recipients in a drink. Who is delivering your water every day, and what is the quality of that water? They've already told us that it contains fluoride, a neurotoxin. 3 years ago, I stopped drinking tap water and recently went onto the Zeta Potential program. This adds alkalinity to the blood and also increases your electrolytes. Something is giving people mass cancers around the world, and jumping onto Zeta Potential for me has been one way for me to alleviate my fears. If you want to jump on the knowledge train with regard to water, click on the link below this show.
This is the news for Thursday, the 15th of May. Finally, Channel 9 has admitted that the COVID vaccine mandates were unethical and the experimental shots were ineffective. It never stopped transmission and should never have been injected into young men and boys. The TGA knew, but they ignored the evidence. I'm going to play part of that clip for you right now, featuring Nick Coatsworth.
Dr. Nick Coatsworth was the Federal Deputy Chief Medical Officer at the time, guiding us through uncharted territory and COVID vaccinations.
When people cannot do their jobs and are threatened with termination and indeed terminated from their employment because they don't get vaccinated, that is forcing. And unfortunately in COVID, there was emerging evidence but during the mandates for vaccines that the vaccines did not stop transmission, and that indeed young men in particular were subject to a side effect from mRNA vaccines, which was inflammation of the heart. And so as soon as we knew those two things, the mandates effectively became unethical and we should have abandoned them straight away. Indeed, young men in particular were subject to a side effect from mRNA vaccines, which was inflammation of the heart.
If we are to apply the precautionary principle, and there may very well be other explanations for this dramatic surge in deaths in 15 to 19-year-old males in the UK. There could be many explanations. But given the coincidences and the correlation that the deaths are overwhelmingly weighted to males and not females, and giving the correlation of the increase coincides exactly with the ramp up of the vaccines in that age group. If we are to apply the precautionary principle, we should suspend these injections in all young teenage males in Australia until an alternate explanation can be found.
Vaccines did not stop transmission, and that indeed young men in particular were subject to a side effect from mRNA vaccines, which was inflammation of the heart.
Meanwhile, the Commonwealth Bank has put the screws on its customer, Louis Christopher. We covered this earlier in the show, whereby they are stepping over the mark in terms of know your customer and have been called out on Sky News. And therefore, what it means is that at least it's getting into the mainstream now. So we can realise that what we're covering here at the Daily Australian, a lot of this news is getting out. And in a further story that's quite interesting is that yesterday in the Murdoch media, they claimed as an exclusive a story we covered more than a week ago on this show about the young man who passed away, who was the one who was attacked during the middle of COVID. And of course, you saw that incident where he was thrown to the ground. So the Murdoch press decided that on the 14th of May, it would be an exclusive. Sorry, guys, you're not up to it. Therefore, what you need to do is come to the Daily Australian for your daily dose of news. Now, the way that this program works is that we do use mainstream news sources to be able to show you that the process that is going on. But of course, not all stories are true, and we can verify those with real facts in real time. And this is the purpose of the independent media. So to continue the show now, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has backed that white South African refugees should be admitted to the USA. These are actually people who are being persecuted at home. These South African families had their land taken from them. The South African government was committing and perpetuating and facilitating acts of violence against them and their families, and they found a place in the US where they can sleep peacefully at night. And it's quite extraordinary. Now, meanwhile, Trump's tour of the Middle East continues, where the Emir of Qatar to the president said, "You are the first American president to officially visit Qatar, so we're very honoured." Meanwhile, Senator Schumer has said that Trump accepting a Qatari jet is a grave national security threat. As Trump has explained, this is a gift that will be received by the Department of Defense instead, not a personal gift. So again, there's a twist there that's very interesting. Meanwhile, Ed Martin, who is the Department of Justice's pardon attorney, is launching an investigation into Joe Biden's last-minute auto pen pardons. We've never seen pardons of this scope.